Live your life within the moment, and don't go wait until the morning. You never know when it is over. All that I know is we'll get older. So let us dance this night away. To the groove and the light that flickers. We get lost in the crowd, it's getting thicker. We get away from the drinks and chatter. Haven't said a word, but it doesn't matter. Feel the air get thinner. I'm standing in a blurry dream. No one else can see us. Live your life within the moment, and don't go wait until the morning. You never know when it is over. All that I know is we'll get older. So let us dance this night away. Thinner. I'm standing in a blurry dream. No one else can see us. So let us dance this night away.
Oh, good evening and welcome to Be More Super Live. If you just joined us, we've got an hell of a live show. Dan, how are you? Before we start talking about our guest that's going to be joining us in literally about 12, 13 minutes.
I think I'm on a 5-day hangover. And sorry, good evening, Brian. I never get to say good hello to you. I want to see, are you all right? How's it going, pal?
Yes, good, mate. Good. It's pretty warm where I am. I don't know what it's like down south for you. But it's about 25, 26 degrees.
Really?
And it's boiling. Yeah, it is boiling. It's going to be like 27, 28 tomorrow. So
it's been sideways rain for about 3 months on the south coast. I don't know what's happening with it, what's gone off. It's been the worst summer I've ever had.
Which, you know what? I'm so excited. We're going to welcome on a guest in roughly about 10, 12 minutes who's got to be one of my favourite guests that I've had on the show. And he's been so kind to, jump straight on that email and said, you know what, of course I'll come back on. It's, of course, Reed Diamond. Obviously, for all the viewers and listeners, he is not here to promote anything past, present or future, as outlined by the SAG-AFTRA conditions. So we've got him on the show to talk about the strikes, how it's affected him as a working actor, and to chat about some other things as well, maybe some seaside resorts, which Dan was quite surprised when I said that he knew about.
Yeah, that's a big step up, that is. But I want to ask him about his drinking prowess. I want to ask him about what's his best pints or some nonsense. But yeah, I want to. It'd be nice to just get to know a guy when they're not promoting anything. You know what I mean? It'd be kind of a unique chat, right?
Yeah. Well. Thing is, I mean, he's an absolute diamond of a guy. See what I did there? See, good pun. And I've got to say, whenever I see him in interviews or doing talks at conventions, He just captivates the whole room. So I'm really looking forward to having him on. But before we welcome him onto the show, I've got to say, I saw something on the internet the other day and it freaked me slightly out. So imagine I was about 9 years old and I saw a horror movie for the very first time. And it was The Exorcist, the 1973 Exorcist. Obviously, I'm not that old. I was born in 79. But it scared the bejeebers out of me. And they've got a new film coming out in October called The Exorcist Believer. I mean, the original, what do you remember of the original Exorcist?
I can't get through it all the way. Again, I was like you. I was traumatized by it as a kid, and I can't get through it again. And I don't know if you've ever been to Blackpool. Now we've just had Linda come on and mention that she's in Las Vegas. Now, if you've ever been to the UK, Blackpool fancies itself as the UK Las Vegas. It's not what it thinks it is. But there, outside the famous Pleasure Beach, which is essentially like a Six Flags or something like that. There was a horror, those walk-through horror, not like a ghost train, but you kind of walk through and people jump out at you and things like that.
Yeah.
And there's a point where you have to walk past the bed to, that the little girl's in from The Exorcist, and she's throwing pillows at you and screaming at you to get out and stuff like that. Again, my desire to sit through The Exorcist once again was the desire had waned after that day. I think I was about 10 years old. And the best thing I remember from that thing in Blackpool was that it was called the Passage del Terror, as opposed to the Terror Passage. They just went for a Spanish name on it, which I really enjoyed.
Well, you know what? One of those, that film for me, I've got to say, the fact that every priest in that film, except for one, was real priests.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. And then where it was actually filmed, the steps, is on Prospect Avenue, which is just around the corner from St. Elmo's Fire, the cafe, the bar thing. It's just literally round the corner. I've actually been down the Exorcist steps and ran back up them. And it's really odd that there's a family that's living in the house still. For me, you know what? Forget that. I would be as far from that house as possible. But you know what? Let's have a look at the trailer for Exorcist Believer.
Good day. Hey, be home by dinner.
I love you. Good morning, Mr. Fielding.
Morning, Catherine.
And here are your daughters, Angela and Catherine. It's about 7 hours ago, and that's the last information we have.
Catherine!
Angela?
If you can hear this, we love you. Please come home.
Hey, you found her? What are you and Catherine doing out there in those woods?
You were just walking and walking. That's all I remember.
Angela, can you tell your dad how long you were gone?
A few hours.
Baby, you've been gone 3 days.
What'd you say?
I didn't say nothing.
Thought I heard you say something.
Hey, baby. You okay?
Wherever those girls went, they brought something back with them.
The body and the blood of Jesus Christ.
Body in the blood? Body in the blood?
Catherine.
Body in the blood. The body in the blood. The body and the blood.
Catherine.
The body and the blood. The body and the blood.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
Mommy?
No, but there are people out there who have.
You have some experience with possession.
Yes, more than I'd like.
But I believe you can help get our girls back.
Exorcism is a ritual. Every culture, every religion, they all use different methods. It's going to take all of them.
Don't be scared,
We've met before.
Mother.
What did you do?
Catherine's heartbeat.
They're beating in sync.
God played a trick on you.
Okay, can I just say that I'm not going to the cinema to watch that. It's probably going to be in the middle of the day, the sunniest day possible, with all the windows, curtains open, surrounded by cuddly toys. How crazy does that look?
Do you know what? There's only one thing scarier than a possessed young girl, as far as I'm concerned. That's two of them. I can't.
Yeah.
I don't. No, thank
one.
you.
Two. We've got Marvel #1 fan when original looks a lot better in his opinion, which is fair enough because we've all got that nostalgia of having the originals as our favorites, but that comes out October the 13th, and I just cannot wait. I really can't. Well, you know what, Dan? It's time to get a wonderful actor on the show. And, I'm just absolutely excited because this guy, again, we can't talk about his past, previous, and future work, but we're going to talk to him as an actor. He's an absolutely amazing guy. So please welcome the wonderful Reed Diamond on the show. There we go.
Oh my God,
Reed.
I'm here. Brian.
You are. Hello, sir.
Dan.
Do you know what?
Hello.
A couple of years ago, we last spoke. You were
Yes.
in the courtyard of a hotel with very choppy internet, if I remember rightly.
Indeed, my lord.
And you had a wonderful beard, long hair.
I did.
You did.
My follicles were in full bloom, and the sound quality was terrible. But we had the most wonderful conversation. That's why I've been looking forward to getting back and talking with you again. But I did make sure I was embarrassed. I listened back to some of it just to make sure I didn't repeat myself today. And sound quality was terrible. So today I thought I'd bring you a professional microphone.
Wow.
And sound quality. Just because I think you guys are worth it, 100%. You're worth my best effort. And but now I feel like my room's a little reverby. But at least the internet.
Do you know what? It's fantastic. Honestly,
brilliant.
Reed, literally, you could be talking into a tin can and it would be good enough. It really, really would. Dan, this is Reed Dan, my new
Hi,
co-host.
Dan. How's
it going,
Reed?
mate?
All right?
All right. Now, go ahead. Sorry, mate. Go.
How's your week planning out? I'm very impressed at your British accent, by the way. I like the way that's getting a look in.
Well, now where are you, Dan? Where's home for you, my friend?
I'm on the south coast, a place called Brighton. It's like the British equivalent of what you'd call San Francisco, but without the bits that have been in the news about San Francisco. But there's still plenty of it.
No, I know. I've heard of your famous pier. In fact, Brighton is like one of the few places I love the UK. I think we talked about this last time, but I love the UK, and I haven't been to Brighton, and I feel remiss. So when I return the next time, I shall go there, and I shall entreat you to show me the sights.
Yeah, I'll give you the tour and avoid the ropey bits.
And it'd be better than Skegness.
Right. Well, I mean, come on. Like I said, Brian will always have Skegness. That's something that we can fondly look back on. And as I said, I think I am still hungover from the multiple trips I went to various pubs in Skegness, but I have only fond memories of them and just pints and pints of lager.
Can you tell us how that came about, Reed? I'm actually intrigued why you've been in such the mecca of the North.
Well, I love the North. I'm unashamedly just an Anglophile. I'm a huge fan of all things UK, the history, and I try to get there as often as possible. And I think it's Shakespeare, and it's that thing. It's so interesting because one of my best friend is from Manchester, right? So he idolizes the world that I grew up in, like the New York rap scene of the '80s, right? And for me, the height is the Factory and Joy Division and everything that was going on in the North in Manchester, and of course London. I mean, all my favorite bands, for the most part, I would think without exception, are all British bands. Maybe a few Irish bands thrown in there, some Australians, but mostly British bands. And of course, he loves that. So it's something about the grass is always greener on the other side, or I don't know what it is, but there's something so wonderful about England and history, and obviously a Shakespeare buff, and I mean things we'll talk about today too. I'm also history. I just love history. I mean, I can get through most of the kings in order, and I can talk with some authority about your Civil War and the regicides and the Roundheads and Cavaliers and all that. But I love it so much. So. I haven't been to Brighton, and I do desperately want to go. But how did I get to Skegness? So Skegness was I can't show that. We'll talk about all the plays we've done. But I worked once in Lincoln, and then I'd returned to Lincoln and to visit someone who happened to live up in Mablethorpe. And on the way, the train let us out in Skegness, and then I saw and as it's so funny because the first time I went there was the beginning of Spice Mania. So every shop was just filled with just miles and miles of Spice Girls merchandise and Teletubbies merchandise. So that's all it was. And in fact, I sort of ironically got into the Spice Girls at the time, and then actually became quite a fan. And yeah, I mean, it's just and now I feel like Russell Brand was just talking about how they're legitimately a great band and they're group, and his daughter's quite into them. But it's funny, and I actually did at a show. We performed a live show, a benefit show, on a television show that I was on for a long time, which I can't speak about. But we performed a benefit show, and I did an Elizabethan madrigal version of "Tell Me What You Want." So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I did it on a guitar. I want her. But anyway, so Skegness. So I stopped off at this train station, Skegness, and it had all these sort of romantic things that I think of England. Just the big games parlors and the rides, and it had this really cool vibe because I think it's but like if I went to Coney Island, I would turn my nose up it, right, as a New Yorker. But going to Skegness, it was very romantic. And then I would just keep coming down there because I'd exhausted all the pubs in Mablethorpe, and I would come down there every once in a while for a couple of nights. And I remember they had this is so so banal and silly, but they had Red Stripe on tap at the one, and that was the lager. And it seemed like I made a day of it at one of those pubs, and somehow I took a cab back to where I was in Mablethorpe. But so I think of it fondly, and Brian and I have shared our love of Skegness.
Do you know what? It will always be in our hearts. But do you know what? At the moment, it is a difficult time. I've got to say, and I wanted to get you on the show to get an actor's point of view, a working actor's point of view of all the madness that is going on at the moment with the strikes, and reading the news and reading the articles. I am so shocked as a viewer and a fan of how actors are treated, and how the studios have taken advantage, and how harsh it can be for actors, especially with healthcare and everything like that. So from your point of view, I mean, how did you get to this stage of striking? What has made all the actors in SAG actually decide, do you know what, we are striking, we're standing up for ourselves?
Well, I mean, I think we're just a little symptom of just a much greater disease. We're not unique. I mean, we're living in very interesting times right now in the world. I used to, as an actor, history is my favorite other subject besides going to drama class. I always loved history. And I remember so distinctly in 10th grade, we learned about, in the United States here, the robber barons, sort of the Gilded Age, the late 19th century, early 20th century in this country, where the wealth gap, there was no viable middle class, and the wealth gap was so extreme. There was the poor workers, and then there was J.P. Morgan and Carnegie and Rockefeller, and they were making exponentially more money than their workers. And I was always so drawn to that period, and because what came out of that was the American labor movement, which, along with the civil rights movements, I think are two of the greatest moments in American history. And the labor movement in the 20s and the 30s in the United States created a viable middle class, and then certainly after the Second World War, they were able to enjoy the fruits of that, and it then subsequently led to the civil rights movement. But I never thought we'd return to that time, and now it's so much worse. But we now have the wealth gap of the top 1%, to their lowest worker is so it's hard to conceive of, right? And also, but the thing too is like most of it, it's just about stock options and your quarterly earnings report. I mean, at least, you know, Rockefeller drilled oil and some of the guys manufactured steel. They actually made something that people could use. But that's, you know, I'm stepping off of the soapbox. But as far as me as a working actor, the business has changed so radically. Now I've been a working actor, and I always say I think I cursed myself, because I remember in 10th grade at the same time I was doing a play, and I remember being backstage, and I go, all I want to do is be a working actor. And so I don't know if I prophesized that or if I just cursed myself to being a working actor, because I've been a working actor since I was 17. I joined the Screen Actors Guild in 1985. When I was 17, I had gotten a commercial. And when I say working actor, and when people say working actor, what that means is I've earned my living since I was 17 by being an actor. I haven't had any other jobs. Put myself through drama school, college, and paid for, you know, whatever we have. And it's a great life. I mean, I knew being an actor, there's lots of ups, there's lots of downs, there's good years and some very, very bad years. But you used to be able to have for lack of a better word, you used to be able to have a middle-class life as an actor. So you could be someone like me who, you know, you may know my name, you may not, you know my face, but my joke these days, so in the last, things have really changed in the last 8 to 10 years. And obviously there were corporate moves that really consolidated the business and made things a little more intense at the beginning of the 2000s. But the last 8 to 10 years have been particularly intense. And obviously that's with the streamers, and that's with the orders of the shows getting smaller, and people making financial decisions oftentimes instead of artistic decisions. And so when people run into me, you know, one of the sweetest compliments they often pay to me for the last 8-10 years is they always say, "Hey man, you're working all the time." And I go, my response is like, I have to. I literally have to work all the time to just make close to what I did 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Because the structure of how people get paid and the lack of residuals in certain platforms has radically altered the landscape. So, you know, I mean, smarter people than I have pointed out that, right, you need to make $26,000 a year in SAG to qualify for health insurance. And 87% of SAG members don't qualify for health insurance. So that means, you know, they're not making $26,000 a year in their profession. And I think this is what's important, because obviously, as I say, the labor and the pay inequity and the unfairness that's happening with the writers and with the actors, that's just a symptom of like as I said, a larger disease. We're seeing that everywhere. We're trying to turn the world into gig workers, and companies are just buying back their own stock and not honoring their customers and not honoring their workers and just making themselves wealthy. So it's interesting, because the last time that we went on a massive strike, Ronald Reagan was the president of the Screen Actors Guild, right? And that was because this new thing called television had come out. And suddenly they're like, well, hey, man, you're going to keep replaying this. We're going to need some money in the back end on this. If you can't just use it, you know, someone's likeness willy-nilly. And so the residuals were born. And residuals, you know, for lack of a better word, are royalties, like in the music business. It's just, and it used to be, so when I came up, there was network television. When I came up, there's only 3 in the United States. There were only 3 major networks, CBS, NBC, ABC, and then as in the 90s, Fox came around. But those were the old days of making 22-episode seasons. You know, you worked for 9 months. You had 3 months off, and then they came back, and you'd know. And you could make a life. There was some financial security. And then things really started to change for me, most notably, I recall, when the cable market opened up. And so then suddenly you were doing these shows on these, whether it be TBS or, you know, one of the Turner networks or whoever it might be at the time. And suddenly they were going to 10-episode seasons. And so you went from 22 episodes where you're working 9 months out of the year to you're working 3 months out of the year. And already the pay was starting to go down, because they're like, hey, we're this new, you know, cable network. We don't have as much money. We can't pay you as much money. And then there was less residuals. But what ended up happening is instead of working for 9 months out of the year, you'd work for 3 months out of the year. And then what would happen is they owned you. So if you were a series regular on a television show, like some of the cable ones I did, they owned you. So you could go a year between shooting those next 10 episodes. And they had the right. So if you got another job, if you got offered even a guest spot on another job, they could say, hey, no, you can't do it. No, we own you. And so that became really problematic because, and then also you had no idea if the show had been picked up. And also with the economics, it's sort of when you work as an actor in television, it's usually a one-way street. Like they own you for 7 years, but they can fire you at any time or reduce your episodes and things like that.
Sorry, Reed, sorry to interrupt, sir.
Yeah, go, Dan.
The 22 episode runs and the 10 episode runs, was that did the palette of the viewer change, or was it a financial decision, or was it a financial decision dressed up as the change in palette from the viewer?
Well, no, it's an interesting thing because I remember, so obviously as an Anglophile, to circle back, like I always loved the BBC model where you guys did 6 episode series, right? And it was amazing. And I remember being on a television show, a network television show in the 90s, and going to the creator of that show, and I said, or the head, the showrunner, I said, hey, we should make shows like that. He goes, we can't. It's not, because the economics aren't good. You can't make a 6 episode series and everyone get paid. But the 10 episode model, which many of the streamers have used, the 8, 10, 12 episode model, which the streamers use, which the major cable outlets use, is great creatively. That was a great move. But the problem was they still owned you. So they could be like, hey, look, we're only going to employ you for 3 months. We don't get to have, first refusal on any job you might get in the meantime. So that's actually one of the things we're talking about. And that's been an issue now for 10 years of like, that's fine. Because I do think like, we're in another golden age. We've gone into this other golden age of television by doing smaller series, because obviously with the network model of 22 episodes, it's hard to, that works. Excuse me. My hummus just came at that. My hummus just repeated on me. Because I didn't want to crash, have a low blood sugar moment while I spoke with you. But creatively, the 10 episode model was great. But what happened? So okay, that's great. And this is, I think, also the theme of the whole thing. Like the business has changed, so we have to change some of the rules. But they were still going by a network model of like, we own you, and we'll let you know when we're picking it up. And then what ended up happening too is each new cable network and now each streamer negotiated their own contracts. I mean, the cable guys, I think, eventually had sort of an overall contract, but each streamer was able to negotiate their own contract. So suddenly they were paying you much, much less upfront, infinitely less upfront, and then, as so many people have talked about with the streamers, there's really no back end. So there's no residuals because they never tell you. There's the great sort of apocryphal, well, not apocryphal because it's actually true, the story, they've read about the Orange is the New Black cast, and the creator takes them in. It's like, we're the biggest show on Netflix. We've got more viewers than Game of Thrones, and half these people are still working their day job, right? They're still bartending or serving or whatever. And that's the thing. And because I hadn't worked for a streamer till a few years ago, 4 years ago, I did my first work with a streamer. And I remember they tried to offer very little up front. They wanted to pay you by the day. And so, and you know how that works. If they're going to pay you by the day, they're just going to cram all of your work into one day and just bleed you dry. And it wasn't even like show up level money. And we said, no, you got to pay me for the episode, which sort of was standard as a guest star or recurring. And that's the other thing, just before we continue on that thread, that was the other thing that's really changed in the business. It's like, having been a series regular on a bunch of shows, in the last 8 to 10 years, most of the parts on a series are recurring. They're stars. So you can be in every episode, and the majority of the cast, even certainly the audience, but the majority of the cast are going to assume that you're a series regular, but you're not. You're there working for probably a 1/6 or a 1/7 of what you would normally work for, but you're doing the same amount of work. Mm-hmm. And so that really changed. That goes to my quote about like when people are like, you work all the time. Like, I really have to, just to make my nut. And I don't live like a king. And so So then what happened, right? So then there was, and then suddenly you're doing these shows, the working actor. We're not talking about the stars on the show, even though this is what's happening too. They're not getting back end. The writer creators are not getting their back end that they were promised. Shows are getting canceled before, because often in these deals too, they work in sort of an incremental raise. So like by season 4, you're going to get this much. So it's like you only do 3 seasons and they cancel you. So no one has to get their bump. And so what was happening, so they're paying less upfront, and I mean significantly less. I mean, I'm talking about in the same amount that someone would have offered me in 1995, 1992, they're offering in 2022, 2023. And that's not accounting for inflation. So if they were offering you $10,000 in 1995, they're offering $10,000 in 2023. And we know that doesn't quite go the same way. So, I've heard people much more articulate than I just say, it's just about fairness, because this isn't about like, no one wants to get rich. We just want to live. And certainly what's happening is we're talking about in every industry, really just trying to turn everyone into it's a gig economy where no one has any security. No one has, but what is happening is these companies are making amazing profits. The shows are doing incredibly well. And it's not like we want all the profits. You just want to be treated fairly. You just want to be paid a fair wage. And if it's going to be played repeatedly, you want there's to be some accountability for that, because that's the other thing, the trick of the streamers always, right, is to say, we don't know. But they do know. Of course they know. They know exactly, right? Because you can see like the number 1, 2, the top 10 shows on any of those streamers. So it's not, it's Sesame Street morals and ethics. It's really just like, be nice, play fair. And it's interesting because this word seems to be the new paradigm shift of 2023, but we are in an inflection point, right? And we can feel that everywhere where, obviously the middle class or the working class has really just been sort of gutted and treated, if you're an Amazon worker, that's crazy, right? Just getting beat up by robots all day and fired by a robocall, right? And so this is just about, there's money there. No one's asking for anything but their fair share. And in a creative business like this, let's be honest, right? And today's a significant day. Today's the 100th day of the writer's strike, right? And the old adage, and I believe it in my bones, if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage. And you need great writers. So it starts with writers. And I am not as well versed, even though I do, try to pay attention to everything they're asking for. And it all, for most of it seems pretty fair. It's just like you need to get paid for doing your rewrites and all this, getting paid to do your work as it used to be, because there's money there. But if people can get $200 million, $50 million bonuses, there's certainly some money just to pay your workers and pay them fairly. And as we saw, most sort of sci-fi, apocalyptic dystopia, they were going to scan the background actors' faces and likenesses, pay them for a day of work, and use them till the end of time. And it's crazy. It's crazy, yeah. So it's the right time.
Crazy,
yeah.
Reed, I'm going to do a message from our sponsors. Please. If I can ask a favor, could you log out then log back in again, because I think there's a bit of interference on the internet side of things. So if you could just log out and log back in while I do our message. Here we go.
I think.
Also, quick message from our sponsors, which is, of course, propstore.com. I've got to say, bidding is now going ahead on The Expanse online auction. So for the fans of The Expanse, get on it right now, because bidding has opened. I'm going to be getting someone from PropStore onto the show to talk about a few of the key pieces, because it's one of my favorite shows. These outfits are just absolutely amazing. The suits are made so well, especially Show Ray that plays Avasarala. Her outfits are absolutely off the charts. So obviously go on there from the 8th. So we're bidding right now on propstore.com. And remember, anyone that wants to get anything from the buy now section, they can get it now with a 10% discount by using Bryan 10. Use Bryan 10.
One of my favorite things I've ever seen. Like, I love that they've emailed you and gone, "Hey Brian, what do you want to be the code for the?"
To be honest, I didn't choose. I thought they were going to say Be More Super 10 or Super 10, but they've just put Bryan 10. But you know what? It's straight to the point. So propstore.com, get on there. They've got props from every single show. Maybe some of the ones that Reed has been in as well. I think they have actually, but obviously we can't talk about that. But you know what? Let's get Reed back on and talk about the absurd amount of money that these streamers make. Hello, Reed.
I'm back. Wow, this worked great.
Oh wow, amazing!
Do you know what? I have got to say, these streamers make, I think it's $82.3 billion a year. And I was watching an interview with Tom Hanks, and Tom Hanks was explaining it like it's a big pie, and obviously, they've got to divide it in slices. And the fact that, you start at the writers, because that is where these amazing stories and characters come out of nothing, and then obviously, the actors and crew and everyone behind the camera and in front of the camera. But it just seems like the industry is broken. It just seems like it's just business. And for me as a consumer, it's a bit like buying your coffee. You want to make sure you get fair trade coffee. You want to make sure that you're buying coffee, that the workers in the fields are getting paid the right amount of money. It's getting ethically sourced. And I feel, from a person that subscribes to Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, I want to make sure that my money, my hard-earned money, is actually going and being given to the wonderful actors like yourself that I see on the screen, that makes me escape for that hour or two from a hard working week. I mean, do you think the industry can actually recover from this?
My wife always complains that I'm always super positive and optimistic about everything, and I do believe. I mean, to use this now hackneyed phrase, we are in an inflection point, and it had to be. That's why we have. It's interesting because in the past, it's been very difficult to. And let me speak just for the actors. As an actor, it's been hard to get us all resolved because people were like, "Well, I just want to work. Let's compromise. And we kind of compromised ourselves into this situation, but I think also at the same time, you didn't really see where it was going. And I think there's a lot of people who are gotten involved in being in the entertainment business, running these companies, who are treating it like it's, the widget factory, not like it's the entertainment business. Because the entertainment business used to be run by people who love to make entertainment. Louis B. Mayer liked to make movies, right? That's how it worked. And there was, and coming up, I've encountered so many people who are passionate about just making good television and making good movies, who are the heads of studios. Bob Evans wanted to make fucking Godfather, right? So it's just like these people want to make good movies. So yes, do I believe it's going to get resolved? But I do think, I know that without question, we voted overwhelmingly in favor to go on strike, and because we know this is a do or die moment. So the industry either, and I do believe, you got no option. You got everybody, there may be a future generation waiting in the wings, but everyone that is talented over 12 right now is in one of these two unions, right? Is in SAG or in the Writers Guild in the United States. And these are your movie stars. These are the people who, fill all the other roles on the call sheet in your show. So it has to get resolved. We live in, look what you're doing, right? You're your own boss, and there's a plan B. It either gets resolved and everyone's treated fairly, or it'll explode and the industry will start again. So much has been decentralized. You've seen we don't quite have the luxury that a stand-up comedian has, but comedians don't need any of these anymore. They just put their own shows on YouTube or whatever platform they choose, and they don't have a boss and no one tells them what to do, and then they have successful podcasts that are more successful than any TV show on the planet. And so it's gonna work out. The hard part right now is just it's painful, right? And obviously, at least the avowed or the professed tactic of, the AMPTP is make people lose their houses and, make sure they have a shitty Christmas, and then they'll come crawling back. But the thing is, which is, to stay, you've got actors and you've got writers, and talking about being a working actor and being a working actor since I was 17. It's like, I know what it's like to not work for long periods of time. I know what it's like to go like, all right, I'm going to see how long I can make this savings last. And that's, we're tough. We're certainly, you picked a resilient group to try to break in this regard. But it's silly. I mean, also you, as you just said so eloquently, you as a fan, well, you want shows, right? Mm-hmm. Now you want your ethically sourced shows, but you also want shows. We're going to need content soon. So it behooves it behooves them to come to the table and be just, not overly generous, just reasonable.
I mean, Fran, the president of SAG, good old the nanny. I had a crush on her when I was younger. I think the majority of people did. And she was saying that this could be going on for 6 months. For me, I'm looking at the bigger picture and the knock-on effect of not having shows, people obviously losing livelihoods, and then you've got cinemas because they're in a bad place as it is now. What sort of knock-on effect do you think this is going to have going forwards? Because 2024 is definitely going to be looking like a bleak, year for entertainment.
Well, to repeat myself, it's a symptom of a greater disease. And the greater disease is people think like, I don't have to pay you for your work. And what we're missing right now is like, the middle class has just been destroyed. The greatest transfer of wealth has happened in the last 3 years from the middle class to the ultra rich. And as we say, like, they're not making anything. They're just buying back their own stock, and it's just trying to please Wall Street, which we all know is not the real economy. And the real economy is, can you afford food? Can you buy a house? And, everyone's being gouged, so they told us during the lockdowns that, we have to raise prices because of the supply chain. Well, that's long gone. And now they're just raising prices willy-nilly. I can't even tell you. My wife just sent me what chicken costs here. We were like, I have chicken tonight. And it's like $40 for, a couple of pieces of chicken. You're like, what are you talking about? So we know we're being gouged, and we also know that the system, and I'm not going to get too political, but like the system overall is a little broken. I certainly, speaking for my country, I certainly feel that the majority of my elected officials of either party are much more interested in pleasing their Wall Street friends than taking care of their constituents. And I'm a lifelong Democrat, and I got to say, my team is they talk a really good game, and they're not doing. I mean, you saw. I mean, we know like how many of them are doing better at the stock market than the greatest hedge fund, right? So they might know something. So the system is. You can't have the idea, right? The corporate idea, right, is that you have continuous growth every quarter, which is that's impossible. You can't have infinite growth throughout time. It's like, let's make a good living. Let's all have how many houses, how many boats can you have? So the system has gotten out of whack, and everyone feels it. So that's why it's important to remember. Because this can seem like rich people problems with SAG and with SAG-AFTRA and with the Writers Guild, but we're not. Like, most of us are just working people. I got a simple nut. I don't own my home. I'm trying to put my kid through school and make sure to go to college, and and then there's food on the table, and maybe every couple of years we take a vacation, right? So it's just, we're not living these grand champagne lifestyles, right? We're craftsmen, we're journey people, and we're trying to do our job, and that's what most people are. Most people just want to, get a fair wage and have a decent life and get to spend a little time with their kids, and maybe take a little vacation once a year or something like that. It's not too much to ask, especially because the wealth of these companies is exclusively built on the labor of their workers. So it's not, like I say, it's Sesame Street. Just be nice, play fair. So it will get resolved. It definitely will. It has to. I mean, right now, I love it when they're like, hey, my God, when, I'm not going to name names, but like, you've got a new guy taking over one of the big the big companies, and he slashes a bunch of networks, and he goes, "My God, look at all the money we saved this quarter." And like, yeah, because you just fired, how many tens of thousands of people. So yeah, this quarter you made a profit, but now you've also, those networks don't exist, or those channels don't exist, so you're not going to be able to generate profit. And then the same person was saying, "Oh my gosh, wow, just this, just in this 3 months of the strike, look how much money we've saved." It's like, yeah, you're not making anything, you're not paying anyone, right? So, but it will get resolved because especially in this industry, but I think in all industries. I mean, you need to value your workers. I mean, we all love Amazon, but like those guys who pack those boxes, they should be treated fairly. They should be allowed to unionize. They should be allowed to take a pee break. They should be allowed to, I mean, the horror stories. I mean, that's just emblematic of what's going on. It's happening to all of us. So I do believe change is happening because no matter what, corporate media is telling you, everyone's feeling the pinch. We're all feeling, the wages haven't risen with inflation, and we all know that. So but some people are so ridiculously, ostentatiously wealthy, built off of producing nothing.
And talking about wealthy people, what's your opinion on the Disney CEO, Bob Iger, that says writers and actors are not being realistic with strikes? It's very disturbing to me.
Well, it's so, I mean, it just feels so like Bastille Day, get the guillotines ready. Like, it's just such a let them eat cake moment, right? You're just like, oh, these ungrateful serfs. How dare they ruin my wonderful retreat with all the billionaires? And I mean, what's interesting, Alan Ruck was speaking the other day. I don't know if you saw it, but he spoke so eloquently, about sort of the element of this being ever thus, right? That, it was kings and queens, and then now, it's these barons, these captains of industry, thinking like we're inconvenient. We're just pieces of the puzzle, and why won't these little people be reasonable? Why are they so agitated? I mean, he said it much more articulately than I would, but it's what's interesting. I mean, when you see those statements, and I remember in the trades about that same week, the person said that, someone, not a non-name, said like the goal was to make people lose their houses and have a terrible holiday season. They've lost the PR battle, because as long as you pay attention, it's so out of touch. And that's the attitude of, I mean, someone, talk about Amazon. I don't want to beat up on Amazon, but it's just like, you haven't created generational wealth. You've created generational wealth for the next 1,000 years, right? It's impossible to spend that money, and you can't pay your workers a living wage and let them, take time to go to the bathroom. Like, it doesn't. Everyone gets it. So we're, I think, as a society, not to be too grandiose about it, we're at a time where like this isn't working, right? And what's interesting, I mean, okay, so the robber barons, the Gilded Age, they try to get they brought they created the Pinkertons, and they brought in this, to shoot the mine workers in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, and they thought they could break you down. And in America, in the United States, that great moment happened after the First World War, and we saw all throughout Europe and North America, it was like these guys came back. They had been grist for the mill. The rich had sent them over there to die, just in a hail of machine gun bullets, and in the charnel house that was the First World War. And then they came back, and they had no jobs, and the Wall Street crash, which was all built on speculation, and the same games were playing. And there was a labor movement in some countries, and in some countries there were revolutions that, altered the face of the globe for the 20th century. I mean, that's because you can only push people so far and treat them like such garbage. And, you can only, and what's so interesting, which I love, and I hope it's true. I mean, I'm just reading now, like, some of the networks are like, well, we make all our shows in Korea, right? So we'll just make content from Korea. But now they're striking, and they're asking for money, from what I'm reading. And, because they're getting paid $300 a day to be an actor on, Squid Game 2. So something has to change, because there's, you can only just have, how many yachts can you have? And
well, do you know what? Bob is struggling. He's only earning $78,000 a day, and literally there's so much caviar that can go around. which I think is ridiculous. And then another thing that hit the news. We spoke about it last week. I don't know if you read up on this about Stephen Amell. Arrow. He was at a convention at GalaxyCon in Florida, and he opened his mouth and not the right words or the right context came out, and obviously everyone jumped on it and took from it, like in typical media style. They tore it apart. But saying that, on Instagram and Twitter, he was self-promoting his latest show, which is just apparent. I mean, what is your view on that? Because you've got to follow so many strict rules within this strike, which, is difficult because obviously you're not working, you're a family man, and you've got stresses and everything like that. I'm sure you would love to be able to pitch something. I mean, what's your opinion on Stephen, on how he's gone around things?
Well, because I don't want to go after, I'm not going for the ad hominems today, but I think there's something, you bring up something, much more, a bigger issue. Like, I believe in unions. Like I said, I think the labor movement is one of the most glorious movements. I mean, you had a huge one after the First World War in your country, because they were like, if we don't, start treating our workers a little bit better, we're going to have a Russian Revolution. And so I believe in my union, and my union has taken very good care of me. I have health care. I, potentially have a pension, and I've been in it for a long time, and I've paid into it, and I've paid into other people's pensions. But strikes matter, and strikes need to hurt. They need to hurt. And because it only gets solved if people can keep working and keep promoting and keep, it has to hurt. I mean, obviously we know that, they asked for that extension in the talks, and that was just so they could open 2 more movies and promote them. And it's
exactly,
and we all see it. You see it. See, so the thing is, like, no one's being fooled right now. So, look, I have a show that was supposed to come out, which I can't talk about. It was supposed to come out this spring, got moved to 2024 as soon as they knew. And so that means if the show goes, it's going to be another year or 2 before I can even get, a second season or whatever happens. So it's like, I can't promote it, can't talk about it, but like, that's it. I'm suffering. Like, I just, we go like, okay, don't, no, there's no trips. We're, no one's getting, no new cars. We're just like, let's, remember, ground beef and, and we'll get through it. But, what a union requires is solidarity. There's always going to be, people who talk shit or are selfish, but I think what's been so great about this, and what has given me such hope and such excitement, is how unified we are. And because it is a make or break moment. As I said, like in the past, actors could be, and you talked about, the wonderful Fran Drescher and Duncan Crabtree Ireland. Like, we have the right leaders at the right time. To have Ronald Reagan, despite your feelings about him when he became president, to have him the head of the union at that time, he was a good fighter, he was a good political guy. And I wasn't sure. I didn't know, enough about Fran Drescher as a leader of SAG, but oh my God, she is the leader we need at the right time. And obviously Duncan seems to be an extraordinary negotiator, and everyone I've heard speak who are on the committees, they've got a grasp on this. And we also know this is a do or die moment. This is like, this is for everything, because we can't go on the way we're going. It's not sustainable for anyone. And it's profoundly, as we say, like as Grover would say, it's unfair. It's not fair, right, man? It's just, you gotta play nice. We just have to be. So it's yeah. So there's always going to be, and also per that, that example you gave, you need to know that, the media obviously works for the corporations, so they're always going to amplify any form of dissent. There was that, they'll cut, we know how we're, Noam Chomsky, manufacturing consent. They're gonna put out the story they want you to that they want to promote, and that's great. They've got that toy, they've got that tool in their arsenal. But no, it's not true. We're so united, and I know, like, I'm just lucky that I have some savings from working the last few years, but like, it's not going to go that far. And, and I know there's people who are hurting, but who are resolved, because we either are victorious in this, or we have to figure out something else.
Definitely.
Okay, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna bring some fun into this because this was that was fascinating.
Let's
Reed. Thank you so much. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna fire about 4 questions at you, quick fire.
Great.
Right. This
Great.
is. I want to know about your time in the UK.
Okay, great. Okay, great. All right, let's do it. Let's do it.
Seriously, that was actually enlightening for me. I believe you're right that we are on the verge of.
Sorry, I don't want to bum anyone out.
A big societal issue, and I think and I think there's a lot of things there needed to be said. But I'm going to just drop in a bit of silliness because we're British. And that's what we do.
That's great. Let's do it.
Did you get to watch any football? Did you find yourself a football team when you were in the UK?
Okay, so here's the problem, Dan. This is so. 2 of my best friends are Brits. And so you can't pick it. Well, and actually 3 if I include Malcolm McDowell. So it's like, so my closest friends who are ardent football supporters, I love football and I love English football. I love the Premier League, but they're all for rival teams. So I feel like any team I pick is going to piss off one of my friends. So I've had to stay fully Switzerland throughout this whole thing because I've got a Manchester United best pal, I've got a Spurs best pal, and then obviously a Liverpool. But if I had to pick a team right now, I would probably go Everton. But it's funny because I do those. It's so funny because I always do those polls online where they're like, "What football teams should you support?" So I'll plug in everything, like, how much money do you make? What's your view on this? And they always give me some very strange one. But yeah, so I'm gonna stay. I have to stay neutral because. So who do you support?
Sheffield
Dan.
Wednesday is the team behind me, so that's
Sheffield.
Just north of the Midlands. Okay, so let's move on.
Okay, great.
Everton. I'll make a note of that. Everton made a note of that. All right. So if there was a role that you could have played in the movies, that you got close to that you just missed out on, was the one that you looked at and went, "Oh, I just wish I really got that part." Is there one of those that still not pisses you off, but you just think that would have been fun to do?
Well, I'll tell you even a funnier story. So I had an audition for this brand new show, this pilot of this show called, you may have heard of it, called ER. And it was called ER. And it was for the part that eventually was played by my pal Noah Wiley. And I remember reading it. I'm like, this character seems like a wimp. I'm not going in on this. So I didn't even go, exactly. So speaking about having boats and multiple homes, I've made those choices many times because, I think we talked about the last time when, Brian, when you and I talked, like, I feel like the greatest gift I do have now is just to say yes to everything. But back when you were younger, they used to say, back before when there was negotiations and you could refuse things. As an actor, they said your greatest strength is your ability to say no. And, I said no to some dumb shit. I was such an idiot. Or oh my God. So I have so many times blown it. Like I was just I remember going to and I did the same thing for another show that year. I'm like, Friends. This seems silly. I don't want to be on this show, Friends. So I've definitely suffered from either youthful arrogance and or ignorance or just being a blockhead at times. That's why now I say yes to everything. So and give it the old college try.
I think that's called the Samuel L. Jackson approach. I don't think there's much he says no to nowadays. You know what I mean? So probably a good way to go. Okay, so I'm gonna second to last question. So a friend of mine, me and my friend Dan, we went to New York about 10 years ago, and we went into Bleecker. We were looking for a place to go for a drink, go to a bar, and we decided with our fancy coats and our British accents, we were going to pretend that we were somebody that we were not. We were going to go, we're scouting out somewhere, and so we went over to these girls to try and chat them up. And we said, we're scouting out some locations around the city, and it was a room full. The entire bar was full of these film students on a night out. Do you know what? I'd love to know how they're getting on in their career right now. And this girl was so passionate about a screenplay that she'd written, she just started crying there and then. And I was so. I guess the question is, have you ever pretended to be somebody you're not inside a bar?
I love that you asked this question. Yes, many times. So
I've got to thank
I
Brian
used
for
to.
that,
Okay. Did you? Okay. So this. I mean, Okay, so back in the late 80s, I used to go to this bar on the Upper West Side, and I usually always, anytime I pretend to be someone else, I'd have an accomplice. So I pretended to be a member of the royal family who was just trying to keep it very low key. And I would just go chat up, and I was like, so do you mind if I order a bottle of champagne to the table? And I just, I'd get some champagne. And I played up, and I would pretend to be a member of the royal family. So we would do that. And it worked. It was like, I was like, I don't want to talk about it, I'd be very demure about it. And I did it all through college. One of my best friends, all we did, because we would just go to parties and or bars and pretend to be people that we weren't. We'd often create, I would be the guy from this country, I'm talking, and I would have it, I would be like, oh, bonjour, and he'd translate for me, and he'd be my translator, and I go, huh? And he'd be like, oh, I go, oh, and he says that he would like to buy you a drink, and I would like him to buy me a drink, he would be, we'd do that for hours, right? So yes, and also, I mean, I even, talking about football players. So I'd just come back from making my first movie in England. I'd made, can't talk about it, but my first movie. And Brian and I talked about it extensively the last time we talked. And the only thing I got from it was like all the crew, right? East End guys, Cockney guys, right? So it's like, I had a couple of pints. I'm not far from Bleecker. I'm somewhere like on West 4th at a bar. There was a great bar. It wasn't Kettle of Fish or something like that. And I'm in the bar, and there's some fucking Cockney guy in there. And I was like, hey, mate, where you from? And I was like, and I had a couple. What did I say? I'm like, I'm from the Commercial Road, right? I was just right off Commercial Road. And he's like, really, man? And we had like a whole thing. And I was like, oh my God, this is going so well. He bought it. But I was like, if he figures it out, he's going to kill me. He's just going to, just nut me. And that it's all going to be over. But it worked great. Yeah. I was like, I grew up within the bells. I could hear the whole thing, mate. And like, but I fooled him. So like, yeah, because that's the whole thing. Like, it's all about, I just want to be other people. So yeah, and there's no level of difficulty like doing it in the real world. It's always fun. So good on you, mate. Yeah, good on you.
Do you know what? Dan is now making notes because going out on a night out with Dan is like literally a wild animal. I will tell you, we went on a reunion at Butlins, and literally we tried to party like we were 20 years old again. It didn't go well. No. But Dan is like he is like a machine. You are, Dan. Yeah. You really are. So
it's the best.
God help you if you do go to Brighton and you go out for a night with Dan, because you won't come back in one piece. Sorry, Dan.
That's
go
fine.
on.
No, I'm going out with Dan. It's funny too. I actually, not only have I gone out to impersonate other people, but I found out like 3 years ago, there was a guy going around pretending to be me.
Sure.
And he was pulling girls pretending to me. So I stop off at this bar I was in Oxnard, California. I was driving through because I used to shoot a show near there, and I stopped off at this bar at a Whole Foods, of all things. Whole Foods have bars, and I stopped there for a beer, and the bartender was like a pretty tough, guy, and he's like, "Hey man, it's good to see you." I'm like, "Oh yeah, good to see you too." It's like, "No man, it's really good to see you." I'm like, "Yeah, it's really good to see you." "You don't remember me, man?" And I'm like, "I remember you." I go, "I've never been here before. It's my first time." He's like, no, man. We used to hang out at Smedley's or whatever it was in Oxnard. I'm like, I have never been to Oxnard or Smedley's. It's like, no, man. And he got really mad, and he was a big guy, and he's like, no, I thought I was messing with him, man. And I was like, and I go, dude, I've never been to Smedley's. He's like, but you're on that show. And I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, that guy. So it turned out there's a guy saying he's me, but he didn't even know my name. He just knew my character's name. And he was going around telling, because he looked like me, apparently, because this guy who was going to kill me at the bar believed that we were one and the same person. But then we put it together, and he was going around saying he was that character on that show, and it was working for him. So, Mazel tov, good for you, my friend.
Amazing. And the last question I had was, do you know how to change the oil filter on a 1997 Toyota Celica? But I feel like that missed some other questions that I should have asked earlier on. But Brian, I'll come back to you. Get me out of this silliness.
Right. So right. I've got to mention Cameo because you're on Cameo, Reed, and I'll just put the link just there at the bottom of the screen. And if you go on to Cameo, you do some absolutely amazing ones. You get your guitar out. You literally, deliver some great ones. Do you enjoy doing Cameo? And are you still live on Cameo?
I'm still live on Cameo, and I'm going to say I think I probably do the best cameos of anyone in the business, because I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. I always write a song, and I write an original song for each person who asks, because I feel like, well, I've always adopted the philosophy, like, anything worth doing is worth doing well. And, if someone, I know what, that $75 or that $100 means to that person. And I was like, you should get that much effort out of me. And I want it to be personal and I want it to be special. So yeah, I just did one yesterday or 2 days ago. I'm doing one today. And yeah, I sit there and I write a song, and if they give me, the more information they give me, the better. And then we have some fun, and it's fun for me because it's like I get to improvise and I get to play some music and be creative. But I forget, if you've taken the time and you've spent your hard-earned cash, and you want this mug to wish somebody a happy birthday, or your coworker a nice retirement, I'm gonna give you everything.
Excellent. So the link is down at the bottom. Reed Diamond / Reed Diamond. Get on there. Get yourself a cameo for any special occasion. It could be. What's the weirdest cameo that you've had? Like the weirdest request? Like, did you have to split up with someone or propose to someone? I don't know. I mean, because some people get some really weird ones.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, because I've got one guy, like I have he's almost like a patron. He sends them to all of his friends, and they sometimes have very weird requests. I'm trying to think the strangest one I got, because I said, like, I think I say in my outgoing, like, I'll fire your friend for you, I'll tell you someone you hate, I'll do whatever you want. But they're usually people. It's probably just because I'm a nice guy. People always want me to do sweet things, so they always it's always birthdays. I'm doing a retirement. I'm trying to think if I've done anything. One guy used it, and I realized he was trying to use it like for an interview for his website, and he made it like we'd had a one-on-one. So I've had to be a little more cagey when people are trying to get me to do a business thing, because that's not what it's about. It's for the fans. I mean, it's a really cool thing. I mean, but no, I haven't gotten to fire anyone. I haven't gotten to break up with anyone. That would be. I wonder if I could do it. If you're looking to fire or break up with anybody, look at the link at the bottom of the screen. Yeah, just do it. I'm excited about doing that. Get them in. She doesn't love you anymore, 'cause you stink and you snore. You are a terrible bore, so hit the road. Yeah, there you go. Yes. Yeah. Boom. Yeah. Made it up on the spot. That's just a soupçon of the magic that might come your way on Cameo. Dan, I'm literally going to book a trip to the UK just so we can go out now. And Brian, you'll come and join us. And we'll do it all together.
Yeah. Do you know what? Talking about the UK, I know you've come over with Star Fury for a few of their conventions. Any conventions planned at all for the next year? I know that you've got to be very careful in the convention talks, because there's a lot of actors tripping up at the moment.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I didn't think we were allowed to do them, so I haven't even pursued them. I love the Star Fury. Those are my favorite. I'm always up for doing cameos because, I'm not particularly shy, and I really enjoy talking to people and having a good time. Especially, those especially the convention. You have a couple of beers, you hang out. It sounds like fun, and people are interested in what you have to say. I'm like, what more could an actor ask for? But I didn't think we were allowed to do any. But also, the show that was about to come out is a genre show. So I was hoping that would lead to. We'll see down the road. But I love doing them. No, I have none. I have nothing scheduled because I didn't think we were allowed to do them, but I see people doing them.
But you can. So the rules are, at your table, all you're allowed to have is just generic headshots. People can bring photos, and a lot of the conventions are selling photos of shows that you've been in that they can bring to the table for you to sign. And obviously the talks.
Oh, that's good to know.
Is based on you and not actually it's based on you and not your work. But yes, Reed, you need to get over. Come over, do a few conventions, and tequilas. Tequilas. Oh dear. WKDs.
Yeah, I'll throw them all, man. No, if you're out there, if you're managing convention, I'm happy to come. I love it. I love to travel. I love to meet new people.
There we go.
We can pretend to be we're doing something. Let's give ourselves some characters for the night as well, Reed. Like let's tell somebody that we're dignitaries from Austria or something and go, what? And then do the entire accent.
I can't do accents, Dan. I can't do accents.
You can be the translator.
Exactly. Yeah. Will you tell them that we find their garments most pleasing, and we would like to buy them a schnapps, perhaps? Or
yes, he would like 2 drinks, please.
And was uns Eisenkreis and kleinen Feinstein.
And then this is where Brian. Brian would have to make up what we've said. I mean, you're in complete control there, Brian. I mean, we'll just do generic Austrian noises, and then he says he really likes your dress. And then we'll be like, that is not what I said, but I must do like. And then we'll get a little glove and slap you around the cheeks with it. Stop it! Stop lying to the ladies.
Sorry.
No, see, we're ready to go, man. This is
excellent.
You'll love it.
Reed, don't go away. It is coming up to the end of the show, but I wanted to say thank you so much, and I would love to have you back just so Dan can actually ask you questions about your career, because he did message me before, and he went, just to get something straight, we are allowed to talk about his past work, and I went, no. We're not allowed past, present, or future, and he just wrote one answer, which was Jesus. So I'd love to have you back on, and we can have a chinwag on future events. But let's fingers crossed this strike gets sorted out. These studios see sense and understand the damage that they're causing. And I've got every faith. Everyone's got to keep strong. And if it means 6 months without entertainment, I would rather go 6 months without entertainment, and have you guys paid correctly, fairly, and treated with kindness and support. But Reed, look after yourself, keep safe, and stay super, my friend. Don't go anywhere, because we're going to chat quickly after.
You guys are the best. Thank you. And Dan, an awesome pleasure to meet you. I love talking with you guys, and I can't wait to do it again and hang out.
My pleasure.